No. Okay, to start things off with today, I just wanted to highlight why exactly we are investing in Berlin. And the reason for that, obviously, is that Berlin and actually Germany as a whole has seen consistent levels of very, very strong growth, especially for a developed European market that by many around the world is considered one of the safest havens that exists, Germany, and particularly Berlin, the capital city. Now, starting off on the rental growth, CBRE come up with a report every year, and everyone who's ever spoken to me about Berlin will have heard me quote this report. It really is the Bible of investing in real estate in Berlin. And over 2019, this first chart here shows you the growth that Berlin saw. Now I'm going to focus in on the top market segment because the top market segment really here includes all new build property. So that's anything that's been built after 2014 encompasses that sector. And one thing that a lot of people that have invested in Berlin know, and a question I get asked a lot, is that Berlin in 2019 implemented a rent freeze. So that meant that all older properties built prior to 2014 had quite stringent controls placed on them. And a lot of questions that come up center around that. And has this rent freeze impacted the property market overall? And the answer I give is actually what that's done is split the market into two property markets within one city. You have the old builds, so built prior to 2014, those are controlled and those are completely split off because anyone living in those apartments are paying so little rent, they will never move out. So what that's done is effectively created a bottleneck and meant that the 30 to 40,000 people moving to Berlin every year only have one option when they're looking for an apartment, and that is newly built properties. And this chart really encompasses that quite perfectly in the fact that over the first year that the rent freeze was implemented, we saw 7.3% rental growth in the top market segment, so new builds, whilst in the average market and the bottom market segment, you saw 1% and negative 0.9% because those rents had been frozen in place and in some cases were required to come down. So 7.3% is actually the highest rental growth figure that we've seen in over 10 years in Berlin. So effectively what's happened is the rents have increased as a result of this rent freeze on builds built prior to 2014. Now, if you look at the growth from a capital appreciation standpoint, we're virtually in line with what we've been seeing in Berlin for the past 4 or 5 years now. The average growth over 5 years, the moving average was around 10%. Last year was not too much different. So in 2019, rather, we saw 8.1% growth. But growth for the overall market was around 10%. So it's quite interesting to note that despite the rent freeze implementing and rents falling in the overall market segment, the capital growth for those rent controlled units, despite their yields, gross yields being 1.5% and below for these rent frozen units, they still jumped in value. And that's how much commitment investors, both institutional and retail, are seeing in the market. They're still willing to buy these products because this just is such a safe haven asset to have at the moment.